Everyone tells the night owl to fix themselves. Wake up at 5 a.m., grind before sunrise, become a morning person. That's the prescription the productivity world has been selling for 30 years. They are completely wrong. The brain that comes alive at midnight isn't broken. It's running a different operating system. And that operating system has a specific measurable advantage that early risers simply don't have access to. Most people think creativity is about having more ideas. It isn't. It's about being able to hold two completely unrelated ideas in your head at the same time, long enough for something to happen between them. That's it. That's the whole game. And almost everything about a normal daytime environment makes that impossible. Franz Kafka worked at an insurance company in Prague from 8 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, every single day. He hated it, not because the work was hard, it wasn't, but because the moment he got home in the afternoon, he was useless, exhausted, socially drained. The world had already taken everything. So he waited. He ate dinner with his family, sat in silence for a few hours, and then somewhere around 11 p.m., something shifted. He would write from 11 at night until 3 in the morning, sometimes later. His most important works, The Metamorphosis, The Trial, The Castle, every single one of them came out of those hours. Not the daytime, not the morning, the deep, quiet, dark. Here's what Kafka understood without ever having the neuroscience to explain it. Daytime runs on what researchers now call inhibitory control. Your brain's prefrontal cortex is fully online, filtering everything, keeping your thoughts socially appropriate, professionally acceptable, logically clean. It is also, without meaning to, killing your most interesting connections before they can fully form. The night loosens that filter. Not completely, just enough. The brain starts reaching further, making stranger links, tolerating more ambiguity before snapping back to the obvious answer. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it the inhibition release effect. And research out of Albrecht University in Germany found that people with a naturally late chronotype, the technical term for night owls, score measurably higher on divergent thinking tasks, specifically when tested at night. The same people scored average in the morning. It wasn't a mindset, it was biology firing in its correct window. I noticed this myself completely by accident during a product launch I was running 2 years ago. I'd been stuck on a positioning problem for 3 weeks. Every afternoon I'd sit down with a document open and produce nothing useful. One night I couldn't sleep, opened the laptop at 1 a.m. out of frustration, and had the whole thing solved in 40 minutes. Not because I was smarter, because the filter was off. The morning person isn't more productive, they're just more comfortable. And comfort is the enemy of the problem nobody else has solved yet. In 1943, a 17-year-old kid in Budapest named Nikola Tesla, no, not that one. Wait, let me give you the real story. Let me tell you about a woman named Vera Rubin. Vera Rubin applied to Princeton's graduate astronomy program in 1948. Princeton wrote back and informed her, matter-of-factly, that they didn't admit women. So she went to Cornell instead, finished her PhD, and spent the next decade doing her actual work largely at night, in borrowed telescope time, in the hours other astronomers didn't want. She took the scraps of the schedule. She took the 2 a.m. slots when the senior researchers had gone home. And in those hours, looking at galaxies rotating in ways that made no sense, she found something. Galaxies were spinning too fast. The outer edges were moving at nearly the same speed as the center, which should have been physically impossible given the visible mass involved. Every calculation said the stars should be flying apart. They weren't. Something invisible was holding them together. Vera Rubin, working the graveyard shift on borrowed telescope time, discovered dark matter. Or rather, she found the first undeniable observational evidence of it. The thing that makes up roughly 85% of all matter in the universe, found in the quiet, in the rejected hours, by the person everyone had tried to turn away. Here's what that story is really about. It's not just that she was a night owl, though she was. It's that the night gave her something even more valuable than focus. It gave her the absence of comparison. Nobody was looking over her shoulder at 2 a.m. No senior researcher was there to say that the data looked wrong, that she should run the numbers again, that this finding was too strange to be real. She sat alone with the evidence and trusted what she saw. This is what psychologists call the audience effect trap. When people know they're being observed, or even just feel like they might be, their thinking narrows. They self-censor. They reach for the answer that sounds credible rather than the answer the data is actually pointing at. Daytime is full of audience. Open offices, Slack notifications, meetings, the ambient awareness that other people are watching and evaluating. Night collapses all of that. And for problems that require you to follow strange evidence somewhere uncomfortable, that collapse is not a minor advantage. It's everything. I think about this every time someone tells me to move my deep work to the morning. The morning is full of audience for me. Emails, messages, the weight of other people's expectations arriving the moment I open my phone. The night has none of that. And some of my clearest thinking has happened in that emptiness, not despite it. The insights that change fields don't come from crowded rooms. They come from the person alone with the data who was willing to believe what they saw. Here's the part that should make you angry. There is a specific cognitive window, documented, measured, repeatable, that opens in the late evening for people with a late chronotype. Researchers at the University of Toronto ran a study where they tested problem solving on insight tasks, the kind of problems where the answer arrives suddenly rather than being worked out step by step. Night owls, tested at their peak hours, solve 50% more insight problems than when tested in the morning. 50%. On the same problems, with the same brain. That window exists, and society has spent 200 years of industrialization telling you to be asleep during it. Marcel Proust wrote In Search of Lost Time. All 7 volumes, 1.5 million words, one of the longest and most structurally complex novels in the history of literature. Almost entirely in a cork-lined bedroom between midnight and dawn. He slept through the morning. He emerged occasionally in the afternoon. He worked at night. The book took 14 years. The night gave him 14 years worth of compressed, distraction-free, filter-loosened thinking that the daytime simply couldn't produce. Here's the mechanism Proust was using without knowing it. Sleep researchers call it the hypnagogic border, the edge state between full wakefulness and early sleep. In the late evening, long before actual sleep, the brain begins transitioning through lighter versions of that state multiple times. Attention becomes less linear. The default mode network, the part of your brain responsible for making unexpected connections, starts running hotter. Ideas from different domains start touching each other. This is not mystical. It is measurable neurochemistry. And it happens on a clock. For night owls, that clock runs 2 to 3 hours later than for early risers, which means if you force a night owl to do creative work at 7 a.m., you're asking them to sprint during the biological equivalent of a cool down. When I started protecting my late hours instead of apologizing for them, my output didn't just improve. The type of problem I could solve changed. Incremental problems. The kind that just need effort, I can do those anytime. But the stuck problems, the ones where every obvious angle has failed, those started breaking open almost exclusively between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. I stopped fighting it. I started scheduling for it. Proust didn't sleep in because he was lazy. He slept in because his best work was happening while you were already asleep. 3 moves to install starting tonight. First, the Kafka move. Stop trying to force your most important thinking into whatever slot feels socially acceptable. Audit the last 10 times you had a genuinely good idea. What time was it? Where were you? Build your schedule around that pattern, not around what productivity Twitter says you should be doing at 6 a.m. Second, the Rubin move. Pick your hardest unsolved problem, the one you've been circling for weeks, and sit with it alone, at night with no audience. No phone, no Slack, no open tab waiting to be checked. Give it 45 minutes of actual solitude. You're not working harder, you're removing the audience effect that's been keeping you from following the evidence where it actually leads. Third, the Proust move. Compress. Proust worked in one long, protected cork-line window. He didn't chip away at the work in scattered 20-minute slots throughout the day. Pick the 2 hours when your brain is actually running hot and treat them like they're irreplaceable, because they are. Don't multitask inside them. Don't check anything. Go deep in the window, then come out. The world calls night owls undisciplined. The data says something different entirely. And if you think this is just about sleep schedules, you're missing the bigger pattern. There's an entire category of people whose brains are structurally wired to find connections others miss, and it has nothing to do with the clock. I will break down exactly how that wiring works and why it keeps getting misread as a disadvantage in the next video. Watch it next.